It's December, that means it's holiday season, and what is the holiday season without some last-minute holiday crafting? I mean literally last minute, like what day is it? Last year, I 3D printed and painted this Baby Yoda tree topper, which is a file that I got on Thingiverse. It's a remix of a remix, but the original sculpt is by Chris Frieze. It's a beautiful model of baby Grogu, and I just printed him out and painted him with my airbrush, and I love having this on the top of my tree. But this year I decided I wanted to 3D model my own ornaments from scratch, and since baby Grogu is always hungry, I decided to make some sweet treat ornaments. So I made 3D printed candy canes, cupcakes, and ribbon candy for baby Grogu's tree. I tried to pick sweets that were kind of iconic looking, that would lend themselves well to the 3D printing medium. And I was sort of going for this pop art realism, sort of iconic treat look. So candy canes worked great for that. The cupcakes ended up working out really well, and the ribbon candy I thought would be perfect for a little filament swap color change action. All of these were 3D modeled with a slightly different technique to achieve the organic shapes in them, and that's something new for me. I haven't done a lot of organic sculpting in 3D modeling. So this was a fun way for me to kind of practice that and learn some new techniques and try some new things out. All of the files for these prints are up on my website and on Thingiverse, and I'll share all of the filament and colors that I used too. But first, let's take a look at how I made these 3D printed sweet treats. So I'll start with the cupcake. First, I did a little sketch of what I was thinking before I jumped into Fusion 360, and my plan was to model the cupcake in 3 separate parts that would fit together after they were printed. The cupcake tin on the bottom, the frosting, and a cherry on top. The cupcake tin was pretty straightforward to model. I made a zigzaggy circle for the bottom sketch profile. Then I duplicated that profile twice, a little bit higher up, and made them a little bigger so I could make a loft to create that gradually widening shape of a cupcake liner. I left the shape solid here because I decided to print this part in vase mode, which saves both material and time. Once I had the liner sorted, I needed to make the frosting, and for this I jumped into the sculpt environment in Fusion 360. I haven't worked much with this mode before, but a while back I followed a great sculpting tutorial by Devin at Make Anything, which I'll link to down in the description. He explains the basics really well, so definitely check out that video and all of his awesome tutorials. I started with a primitive cylindrical shape, and I just smooshed it around for a few hours until I had something that kind of looked like frosting. Then I flattened the bottom with an extrude cut to make it printable. To make the pieces interlock, I used the top profile of the cupcake liner to do an extrude cut in the bottom of the frosting. Then I just enlarged that just a hair for some wiggle room because gaps tend to shrink a bit during printing. I used the same sculpting process to make the cherry on top, and I nestled it down into the frosting before doing a Boolean operation to cut out a space for the cherry to sit in. With the cherry in place, I made a 2mm hole through all the pieces from top to bottom so that I could thread a piece of ribbon through to hold everything together and hang it on the tree. I printed the liner in vase mode, and I printed the frosting and cherry with standard infill using a shorter layer height to get all those curves as smooth as possible. The pieces fit together like this. The liner slots into the flat bottom of the frosting, and the cherry sits in the little divot on top. If you don't want to make an ornament and you just want a 3D printed cupcake, you can fill that hole in the cherry with a stem. I made a stem using my 3D pen and some brown filament, and yeah, it pretty much looks like a stem. If you do want an ornament, you can thread a ribbon through the whole cupcake, and I used a straight pin, kind of like a needle, to thread the ribbon up from the bottom of the cupcake and just created that loop at the top of the ornament. Then I tied a knot at the bottom to keep it all together. It's fine if you don't have a perfect bottom layer on your frosting and the liner doesn't slot in quite perfectly, because gravity will just keep everything in place once you have the ribbon in. After printing, I snipped up some filament in various colors to make sprinkles for the tops of the frosting. I glued the little pieces to the top of each cupcake with super glue, and I tried to think of the filament colors as flavors. So white looked like vanilla to me, and the soft pink looked like maybe strawberry or raspberry. I also tried printing the frosting with marble filament, because I know everyone jokes about how marble filament looks like vanilla bean ice cream, but it kind of just looked gray and a little bit unappetizing as cupcake frosting, so I decided that that one might have to be mint chocolate chip, and I put some brown sprinkles on that to kind of look like chocolate. I think these ended up looking pretty great on Grogu's tree, and the lights on the tree make the cupcake liner kind of glow. Next up, let's look at these candy canes. Now these actually print in flat layers, and I just did that by pausing the print a few times and changing the filament from white to red and back to white again. And when they come off of the printer, they look like this. All of the layers are straight and flat. Now to get this classic candy cane twist, here's the trick I used. These were really simple to model in Fusion 360. I started by drawing the hook shape of the candy cane as a sketch line, and then I created a pipe object following that line. I rounded the edges and shaved off the bottom to make a flat surface for printing, and that was it. Candy cane shape achieved. But the twisting colors are really what makes this look like a candy cane, and here's how I did that. The colors are actually printed in flat layers, and I did that by manually pausing the print and changing the filament from red to white and back again just a couple of times. It's nice to print a bunch of these at once so you can get the most out of those filament changes. It's definitely worth the effort because the twist looks much better with 3 or 4 stripes. To get that classic candy cane twist, I dunked each candy cane in hot water for a few minutes, then I twisted it by hand. And I used water right off the boil from my tea kettle. It's gotta be really hot, so be careful. And I held the candy cane under the water for a bit until I could tell it had softened up. It was much more manageable to do one side at a time rather than throwing the whole candy cane in and trying to twist the whole thing at once. The plastic cools really quickly and it stays in that classic candy cane twist. You don't need ribbon for these, you can just hang them on the branches of the tree. They just stay there and they pretty much look like real candy canes. Just make sure no one tries to actually eat them. Now, it took some experimentation to get this to work. For my first few attempts, I either had too much infill, resisting the twist, or not enough infill, resulting in this crushed straw look. Neither of these are very candy cane-like. I found the best option was to use the concentric infill pattern in Cura. This gives the print enough internal structure to keep it from crushing in, but it's all running down the length of the print, so it doesn't fight against me so much when I'm trying to apply the twist. Now the ribbon candy actually started on my iPad, and this is really exciting because I've been wanting to figure out how to do more organic shapes and get more of a freehand drawing feel in my 3D printed projects. And I recently found a really great tool for that. Adobe recently launched Illustrator for the iPad, and it's a great way to make hand-drawn vector shapes. I have just scratched the surface with this new app, but I've already used it to make hand-drawn text and patterns that can be extruded in Fusion 360 and 3D printed. And I'll probably go into more depth about how to use this app in a future video, but let's look at how I used it to make this ribbon candy. So if you don't know what ribbon candy is, I guess I don't really know what it is either. I've never actually had the real thing or seen it in real life. I've only ever seen the ornaments, but they're always squiggly shaped like this and they have stripes, so that's what I was going for. So again, I sketched out a little plan before I started. It's a pretty simple extruded squiggle shape, and I decided I would use the filament swap technique to change the colors during the print to create those signature stripes. In the new Illustrator app for iPad, I used the blob brush pen to draw some squiggles that look like that sort of figure 8 shape of the candy. This was really fun to do, and this was so much easier than drawing these squiggles with the typical Bezier pen tool with a mouse. It's doable, but honestly, to draw flowing vector shapes by hand like this is kind of a dream come true for me. I guess if you have a drawing tablet like a Wacom tablet, you could already do this in Illustrator, but I don't have one of those, so this kind of blew my mind. So that was literally like 30 seconds in Illustrator on the iPad. And the cool thing is the files sync over Adobe's Creative Cloud service. So when I open Illustrator on my computer, the file is just there. So on my computer, I chose the shape that I liked best and I exported it as a DXF file to bring it into Fusion 360. In Fusion, I extruded it and I rounded the edges just a little bit. Then I added a hole running down the center for a ribbon. And I used a trick here that I learned from Angus at Maker's Muse. I used a hexagonal hole instead of a circular hole, and that keeps the hole from distorting and closing in when it's printed vertically. I sliced the model in Cura and I set up a few pauses during printing for filament changes, which gave me a bunch of stripes. Again, it's great to print a bunch of these at once, so you're not doing 4 filament changes for just one ornament like I did. Okay, a quick technical note here. Printing these turned out to be surprisingly tricky because it turns out that all those squiggles are actually pretty G-code intensive. With no straight lines and all those curves that swing back and forth, the printer is receiving constant instructions, and if those instructions are being delivered over USB, you may run into data buffer issues like I did. My prints were looking very crunchy and bumpy until I switched to printing off an SD card instead of printing over USB from a Raspberry Pi. So I definitely recommend printing these from an SD card and printing them slowly. That gave me buttery smooth sides that really look like candy. After printing, I threaded some ribbon through the ornament, again using that straight pin trick, and I tied a knot on the bottom. And yeah, I think they look pretty good on the tree. So it started out as kind of a silly holiday crafting project, but I ended up trying a bunch of new things and learning some new ways to make these irregular organic shapes. These candy canes were really tricky to get right, and it was way harder to 3D print this squiggly ribbon candy shape than I expected it would be. So I learned a lot just doing that. And all of this gives me so many ideas for things I want to try in the future, so it was all worth it. So if you want to print any of these out, check out the links in the description. And as always, I love to see what you're making. So tag me on Instagram or Twitter, or just drop a comment below and let me know what you're working on. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an excellent holiday season, and I'll see you again next time. We'll see you again next time, won't we? Yeah.